She was glowing with life, 7 months pregnant, full of ambition, and freshly in love. But within hours, all that light disappeared into the shadows of a quiet Italian town. This is the haunting story of Giulia Trontano, a woman who vanished without a trace, and the man who claimed to love her. Sinigo, Italy, May 28, 2012. The sun set like any other evening in the sleepy town, but for Giulia, it would be her last known sighting. She was 29, young, talented, with a baby kicking inside her and dreams stitched tightly into her heart. She simply vanished. Her phone went dead, messages unanswered, silence cold, sharp silence. The first to raise alarm was Alejandro Impadiello, her boyfriend, her partner, the man who was supposed to be by her side through everything. He told police he came home from work to find their apartment empty. No note, no sign of a struggle. No Julia. Just her belongings, untouched. Her plans for the week, still penciled in. Nothing suggested she was planning to leave. And yet, she was gone. As investigators peeled back the layers, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't a random disappearance. Giulia had messaged her mother, Loredana, and her closest friend just the night before. Her words were full of anxiety and exhaustion. She spoke of an intense argument with Alejandro. She said she felt overwhelmed, emotionally broken. No one knew those texts would be the last trace of her voice. Giulia wasn't the kind of woman to disappear. Born in Naples on May 2, 1994, she grew up in a warm, traditional family that valued love, loyalty, and fierce independence. Her parents raised her to speak her truth, chase her dreams, and always come home when the world grew too loud. She was brilliant, artistic, articulate, and determined. Real estate wasn't just her job. It was her passion. She saw beauty in architecture, potential in empty spaces, and freedom in the financial independence her career gave her. By 25, she was already successful in her hometown, but she wanted more. More challenge, more life. So, in 2020, she set her sights on Milan, a city of sleek buildings, bright lights, and endless opportunity. She packed up her life and drove away from the familiar, hopeful that the city would offer her both a future and fulfillment. Milan welcomed her quickly. She was sharp, quick to adapt, and unafraid of competition. She networked hard, closed deals fast, and made friends in high places. But amid the buzz and chaos, something felt missing. She wanted connection, something real. That's when she met Alejandro. They crossed paths at a fancy hotel bar where Giulia's team was celebrating a big contract. Alejandro was behind the bar, tall, magnetic, with eyes that sparkled like secrets. He was smooth, funny, and dangerously charming, the kind of man who makes you forget the clock is ticking. Giulia fell fast and hard. They were inseparable. Late-night dinners, stolen kisses in the rain, whispered dreams over candlelight. Alejandro told her about a son from a previous relationship, but insisted the past was behind him. Giulia believed him. She always gave her heart fully, without caution. Within months, they moved in together. But love can be a mask, and Alejandro wore his well. He was born in 1993, and while he seemed secure in his life, it was mostly illusion. As a bartender in an upscale hotel, he was surrounded by wealth and beauty, but he owned none of it. He was a master of appearances, charming guests, blending into elite circles, pretending to be something he wasn't. To outsiders, he was relaxed and likable. To Giulia, in the beginning, he was affectionate and supportive. But behind closed doors, cracks began to show. His teasing turned cruel. He mocked her accent, a quiet jab at her southern Italian roots. He insulted her favorite football team in public, knowing how much it meant to her. Slowly, subtly, he chipped away at her confidence. What began as small comments turned into emotional bruises. Giulia didn't see it at first. Love can blind us to cruelty. But as her belly grew, so did the tension. And the night before she vanished, it exploded. No one knew what exactly happened behind the walls of that apartment on May 28th. But what is known is this. Giulia walked out the door, 7 months pregnant, carrying a storm of pain in her heart. And no one ever saw her again. First, Julia brushed it off. The snide remarks, the cold glances. She told herself it was stress, maybe tiredness. Alejandro had a sharp tongue, but he always came around, didn't he? But as the days stretched on, the warmth she once clung to faded into something far colder. Their home, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, became a minefield. The smallest things, how she placed a vase, how she replied to a simple question, set him off. His anger wasn't loud. It was quiet, controlled, cruel. He'd cut her off mid-sentence, ignore her presence entirely, and then, as if someone flipped a switch, he'd be affectionate again, joking like nothing had happened. That was the rhythm of their life now, psychological whiplash. Julia tried to decode him. She questioned herself, wondering if she was the problem. But the deeper she dug for clarity, the more distant he became. He never opened up, never explained. He simply watched her with unreadable eyes. But behind those eyes, Alejandro was hiding something far more sinister than mood swings. A double life. While Julia believed he was working late at the hotel bar, building their future, Alejandro was slipping into someone else's world. Her name was Algra. Young, ambitious, multilingual, and carving her path through the hotel industry. She met Alejandro behind that same bar, and from day one he spun a story. That he was single. That Julia was just a past chapter, already packing to move out. It was a lie wrapped in charm. Neither woman knew about the other. He moved like a chameleon with Julia. He played the moody partner working through a rough patch. With Algra, he was the free-spirited romantic looking for something real. He lived in the present with Julia and promised a future to Algra. And somehow he kept the act up flawlessly. But lies have a way of unraveling. By the end of 2022, Julia's body began sending her signals she couldn't ignore. Fatigue, food cravings, a missed period. One pregnancy test later, 2 lines stared back at her, clear and undeniable. She was going to be a mother. For a brief moment, she felt joy, the kind that bloomed from deep within. But it was quickly shadowed by anxiety. She wasn't alone in this pregnancy. Alejandro was the father, and their relationship was breaking. Still, she told him face to face, heart pounding, hoping he'd meet her with support, maybe even excitement. But all she got was silence. Then a single cold question. Are you sure?
No imbras. No smile.
No curiosity about due dates or baby names. Just emotional vacancy. The days that followed were quieter than ever. Alejandro never brought it up again. No future plans. No doctor visits. Just silence. Julia tried to stay strong. She told herself he needed time. That maybe deep down he'd come around. But as January rolled in, she was spending more and more nights alone, staring at her future with rising fear. And Alejandro, he was spiraling, because in a twist crueler than fiction, his other life was crashing too. Algra, the woman who believed they were exclusive, was also pregnant. He was stunned, trapped between 2 women, 2 pregnancies, and a towering mountain of lies. But Algra's reaction wasn't what he feared. She wasn't sure she wanted the baby. When she shared the news, Alejandro didn't skip a beat. He wrapped his manipulation in soft words, gently persuading her that now wasn't the right time, that he'd support whatever she chose. But made it clear he thought abortion was the sensible option. She hesitated, then agreed. Alejandro went with her to the clinic, all smiles and fake reassurance, believing that with one pregnancy out of the way, he could somehow manage the other. Julia's, the one he couldn't control. But Julia wouldn't bend. She refused to end her pregnancy. Despite the emotional distance, despite the pain, she stood firm. She was going to have the baby with or without him. That decision shattered whatever illusion of control Alejandro had left. To him, Julia's strength wasn't inspiring. It was a threat. His house of cards was tilting, and he needed a new plan. Final one. That's when something changed inside him. By late 2022, Alejandro had begun researching. Not baby names, not co-parenting tips, but drugs. Quietly, carefully, obsessively, he scoured the darkest corners of the internet for substances that could cause harm without leaving a trace.
Forum.
Scientific articles. Obscure medical journals. His search history, if ever uncovered, would read like a blueprint for evil. Julia had no idea. While she decorated a nursery in her heart, he was mapping out something cold, something final. The walls were closing in, and the truth was on its way. Alejandro had crossed a dangerous line. By early 2023, with Julia refusing to end the pregnancy, his control began to slip, and that terrified him. Determined to regain it, he delved into the darkest corners of the internet. His search wasn't casual. It was methodical. He wasn't looking for a scare tactic. He wanted a solution, a way to make Julia and the baby disappear without leaving a trace. He researched poisons, everything from plant-based toxins to industrial chemicals. Cyanide, ricin. He scrolled through forum after forum, digging into symptoms, forensic traces, and case studies of unsolved poisonings. But those options were risky. Most were either too hard to obtain or left glaring evidence behind. That's when he discovered rodenticides. Unlike the exotic substances, these were easily available, legal, and subtle. Some variants worked slowly, mimicking symptoms of pregnancy complications. Fatigue, nausea, internal pain. It was perfect.
No alarms. No suspicions.
And so, Alejandro's twisted plan began. He started small, mixing trace amounts into Julia's drinks and meals. To her, it was just another craving or another off day. But within weeks, she began to spiral. Extreme fatigue, dizziness, sharp abdominal pain. She confided in her friends, thinking it was just her body adjusting to the pregnancy. No one, not even Julia, considered the possibility that she was being poisoned. But Alejandro did. He watched closely, measuring her reactions, noting the changes. But her body wasn't giving in. Her symptoms lingered, but the pregnancy was progressing. The baby was surviving, and so was she. That infuriated him. The poison wasn't working fast enough. He increased the dosage. Still, Julia pushed through. Unaware she was in a silent war for her life. While Julia struggled physically, emotionally, she clung to hope. She believed Alejandro's distant behavior was just fear, that he'd come around. But he wasn't just absent, he was plotting. Meanwhile, his other life began to fray. With Algra, things had started off as a thrilling affair. She admired his charm, his intensity, the way he spoke about their future. He told her Julia was just a part of his past, an ex who wouldn't move on. He never mentioned the pregnancy, never showed his social media, never talked about his home life. Algra brushed it off at first, but over time, tiny cracks began to form. The real shift came when she accidentally saw a photo on his phone, one he hadn't meant for her to find. In it, Alejandro was with Julia, smiling, intimate, unmistakably close. It wasn't an old picture, it was recent. Algra didn't react immediately. She wanted to be sure. She began to track the lies. His late nights that didn't match up with hotel records, his unreturned calls, the flimsy excuses. When she confronted him, Alejandro didn't miss a beat. He claimed Julia was manipulating him, that she was spreading those photos to guilt-trip him, that she was lying about everything. But something in his voice didn't sit right. The more questions she asked, the more tangled his stories became. And then came his boldest move yet. He showed her a DNA test that claimed the baby wasn't his. It looked official, but it was fake. A downloaded document, edited to fit his narrative. Algra was shaken, but not fully convinced. One night, while Alejandro was asleep, Algra made a decision. She picked up his phone and called the number saved under Julia. Julia answered instantly. She didn't sound obsessed or vindictive. She sounded tired, hurt, like someone searching for the truth, not someone playing games. That call changed everything. Algra asked to meet. Julia agreed. They knew what they were about to uncover could shatter everything they thought they knew. The next day, they met at the hotel where Algra worked. Tension filled the air as the two women sat down, face to face. Neither of them knew the full story yet, but they were ready to piece it together. Allegra began, her voice calm but firm. She told Julia everything she had found. The lies, the manipulation, the doctored files. And then Julia spoke too. The truth was no longer hidden. And Alejandro's perfect deception? It was collapsing. Allegra's voice trembled as she revealed the final piece of the puzzle, the so-called DNA test. "He told me it proved the baby wasn't his," she said quietly. Julia's eyes didn't waver. She leaned in, listening intently. "That test was fake," Allegra continued, her voice firmer now. "He downloaded some file off the internet and edited it. I checked." Julia was silent for a beat. Then she slowly explained her side. "I never took or offered a DNA test. We were still living together, Allegra. I had no reason to believe we were anything but a couple. I was carrying our child. And I truly believed he loved me." Every word from Julia hit Allegra like a blow. The timeline of the pregnancy matched exactly. The lies, the emotional manipulation, the cover-ups, they weren't just deceptions. They were deliberate, cruel acts of control. With every detail that came out, Allegra's world cracked wider. She had been lied to, played like a pawn. But instead of turning her pain into hate, she saw Julia for what she truly was. Not a rival, but another victim trapped in the same dark web. For over an hour, the two women sat side by side, connecting the dots, revisiting timelines, and piecing together Alejandro's elaborate double life. By the end of their conversation, something shifted. They weren't enemies. They were survivors, united not by betrayal, but by a shared truth. And then Julia made her decision. "I'm done," she said. Her voice didn't shake. It was steady, final. "He's not part of my future anymore. Not mine. Not my child's." When she returned home, she didn't wait. The words poured out of her like a dam had broken. She confronted Alejandro with everything she knew. His lies, his manipulation, and his fake DNA test. His first reaction was smug disbelief. Then came the anger. "You've been snooping in my personal life," he shouted. Julia didn't flinch. Calmly, she told him she was leaving for Naples and that this, whatever it had been, was over. Later that night, she sent a message to her mother and sister, letting them know about her decision. They offered to help her return, but Julia said she needed a few days to sort things out in Milan. She never made it back. Alejandro sat alone, fuming. The power he held, the image he had crafted, was collapsing. Julia had seen through him. She had exposed the truth. He wasn't in control anymore, and it enraged him. In his mind, everything was slipping. Julia, Allegra, the life he had built on lies. He tried to talk to Julia again, to manipulate her one last time. He claimed he still loved her, begged her to reconsider. But she wouldn't. She just kept packing, stone-faced and silent. That silence drove him mad. He screamed. He raged. But nothing broke her calm. That's when he snapped. In a sudden, violent burst of anger, Alejandro grabbed a knife from the kitchen counter. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds. Swift, brutal, and irreversible. He stabbed Julia, again, and again, 37 times. When it was over, he stood above her lifeless body, trembling. Reality hit him like a tidal wave. She was gone, and he had done it. Panic set in. He dragged Julia's body into the bathroom, doused her in alcohol, and set her on fire, hoping flames would erase his crime. But it didn't work. The fire charred her body, but the evidence was still there. Blood clung to the floor, the walls, the furniture. He scrubbed for hours with rags and harsh chemicals, trying to wash away what couldn't be undone. But no matter how hard he tried, the scene still screamed of murder. Alejandro convinced himself he could still get away with it, that somehow he could spin a new lie and save himself. What he didn't know was this. The truth had already begun its march toward justice. Alejandro knew he had crossed a line from which there was no return. And now, with the irreversible weight of his crime hanging over him, he began the next phase of his plan: deception. Cold, calculated, and disturbingly strategic. He chose to craft a reality in which Julia hadn't been murdered, but had simply walked away. To buy time and throw suspicion off his trail, Alejandro took Julia's phone and began sending messages to her loved ones. The first went to her mother, a vague text, cloaked in ambiguity. "I need time to think. Don't worry, I just need space." It was short, unsettlingly impersonal, and just cryptic enough to avoid setting off alarm bells. He then messaged one of her close friends with another ambiguous update, claiming that Julia had left voluntarily but wasn't ready to reveal where she was going. These lies were meant to sow confusion, not too much, just enough to keep people wondering and waiting. But Alejandro knew that silence alone wouldn't be enough. Someone would inevitably involve the authorities. So he took the lead himself. Hours after the murder, he made the call. He told police that Julia had stormed out following an argument and never returned. Calm and composed, he laid out a timeline. He had left for work in the morning, and when he came back, she was gone. Her passport, money, and a few personal items were missing, the perfect scene for a voluntary disappearance. To investigators, something didn't feel right. His version of events was too neat, too rehearsed. His demeanor was unnerving, composed to the point of coldness. While Julia's family and friends were in anguish, Alejandro displayed no genuine concern. He didn't call around, didn't join the search, didn't even share a missing persons post. And beneath that mask of control, the truth festered in the shadows. At night, while the world was looking for Julia, Alejandro was busy moving her remains. He first concealed her dismembered body in the bathroom, but the guilt or fear drove him to relocate them again and again. Wrapped in plastic, her remains were hidden in the garage. Then the basement. Then back to the garage. He was spiraling, making mistakes, all while trying to stay one step ahead of the investigation. But the cracks were beginning to show. Police began scrutinizing every detail of his story. They spoke with neighbors, tracked inconsistencies, and began watching Alejandro closely. And then came the evidence. Forensics uncovered traces of blood in his car. Despite Alejandro's attempts to clean it, the technology didn't lie. The blood belonged to Julia. Inside the apartment building, subtle red smears were discovered on the stairs and hallway, almost unnoticeable to the naked eye, but chemical analysis revealed it was blood, poorly cleaned. Alejandro's strange behavior only raised further suspicion. Unlike most people in his position, he didn't reach out to Julia's family. He didn't show up to search parties. He stayed quiet, too quiet, doing only what was legally necessary and nothing more. But the final unraveling came with a digital trail, his own online footprint. When detectives seized his devices, what they found shocked them. Internet searches dating months back revealed a sinister obsession. He had researched poisons, their effects, how to administer them without detection. He even looked into why certain toxins might fail. The fake DNA test he had shown to Algra? It was traced to an online template designed for falsifying medical documents. Alejandro's narrative collapsed under the weight of mounting evidence. Interrogators pressed harder, dismantling his lies one by one. They showed him blood evidence, questioned him about his search history, played witness statements from neighbors who heard violent shouting from the apartment. And then came the final blow. Surveillance footage from the days after Julia's disappearance showed Alejandro making repeated trips to the garage, carrying large bags, and returning empty-handed. Cornered and exhausted, Alejandro finally broke. He confessed and led police to Julia's remains, abandoned in a wild, overgrown area near Sunigo. Forensic analysis revealed a chilling attempt to burn her body, but the effort had failed. Italy was shaken to its core. Julia Trantano's death was not just a personal tragedy, it became a national reckoning. A grim reminder of the violence that lurks behind closed doors, masked by the face of a smiling partner. Her murder sparked a wave of outrage. Women across the country flooded the streets with signs demanding stronger protection for domestic abuse victims. Marches were held in Milan, Rome, Naples, voices unified in pain and anger. At one protest, Julia's sister, Carla Treminano, stood before the crowd and pleaded with lawmakers. How many more? How many more families must be shattered before real change happens? Meanwhile, Alejandro underwent a psychological evaluation. Court-appointed psychiatrists described him as a narcissist with no empathy, deeply self-absorbed, and utterly incapable of remorse. Everything he had done, every lie, every manipulation, was to maintain control and protect his image. He tried to feign sorrow during the trial, insisting the murder was a moment of spontaneous rage. But the evidence said otherwise. Months of planning, poisoned drinks, forged documents, and the calculated cover-up. His actions weren't impulsive, they were premeditated. Algra, once deceived by him, turned state witness. Her testimony revealed the full scope of Alejandro's manipulation, the fake DNA test, the lies about Julia's pregnancy, the double life he had hidden. She described her guilt and grief during the trial, then disappeared from public view afterward, relocating to escape the shadows of the tragedy. In the end, the court convicted Alejandro of first-degree murder, citing the cruelty of the act, the prolonged psychological abuse, and his deliberate efforts to destroy evidence. He was sentenced to life in prison. In her final statement, the judge made it clear this was not a crime of passion. This was a crime of power, of control, of cold-blooded planning. There is no excuse for it. Julia's story struck a chord with millions. Though her life was taken, her voice sparked a movement, a cry for justice that still echoes through Italy. Lessons from Giulia Trontano's heartbreaking story. 1. Emotional abuse can be just as dangerous as physical abuse. Giulia's story teaches us that abuse isn't always visible. Emotional and psychological manipulation often go unnoticed, yet they slowly erode a person's confidence, perception, and freedom. Alejandro didn't strike Giulia in public or leave visible scars early on. He controlled her through deception, gaslighting, and emotional dominance. By faking DNA tests and lying about her pregnancy, he kept her mentally trapped in a false narrative. Giulia's isolation was calculated. He made her believe that she was confused, paranoid, or overreacting. Many victims of abuse don't realize they are in danger until it's too late. Emotional abuse chips away at reality, creating a dangerous imbalance of power where one person exerts complete control over another. Friends and family may notice changes in behavior, withdrawal, anxiety, or unusual dependence, but without physical signs, the severity is often underestimated. This story underscores the importance of recognizing early red flags, controlling behavior, dishonesty, gaslighting, and secrecy. Society must learn to treat emotional abuse as seriously as physical violence. Giulia's story reminds us that manipulation is a weapon, and when left unchecked, it can lead to irreversible tragedy. Speaking out early and creating a strong support system can help victims reclaim their autonomy before their lives are threatened. 2. Trust must be earned, not assumed. Alejandro Impadiello's actions reveal how dangerous blind trust can be. He lived a double life, charming on the surface, manipulative behind closed doors. Giulia believed she was building a future with someone who loved her, only to be deceived at every turn. He fabricated documents, faked DNA results, and used her trust as a shield to cover his lies. We often associate romantic love with unconditional trust. However, trust must be earned through consistent behavior, honesty, and transparency. Giulia's experience warns us that manipulation can exist even in intimate spaces, and that someone's words shouldn't always outweigh their actions. Alejandro's calm demeanor during the investigation even fooled police at first, but his lack of genuine emotion, rehearsed responses, and overconfidence hinted at deeper deceit. This lesson teaches us not to ignore our intuition or dismiss our concerns because of love. If someone's words don't match their actions, or if secrecy and contradictions become frequent, it's a sign to step back and reevaluate the relationship. Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect and honesty, not dominance and fear. Giulia trusted someone who didn't deserve it, and the cost was her life. Let her story remind us to protect our emotional boundaries. 3. Technology leaves digital fingerprints even for the cleverest criminals. Despite Alejandro's efforts to stage Giulia's disappearance and erase the crime, modern forensic and digital technology helped uncover the truth. He tried to create the illusion that Giulia left voluntarily, using her phone to send misleading texts. He tampered with evidence, moved the body multiple times, and even tried to burn it. But it wasn't enough. What ultimately betrayed him were the digital footprints, search histories about poison, websites for altering medical documents, and surveillance footage of suspicious movements. He underestimated the power of technology to recover hidden data. Even blood traces invisible to the naked eye were detected. His calm performance could only go so far. Technology exposed his lies and cracked the case open. This teaches us a crucial truth. In today's world, every action, online or offline, leaves a trace. For investigators, digital evidence can be just as damning as physical proof. It also offers hope for justice, especially in cases where the truth is buried under deception. Alejandro's case highlights how advances in forensic science and cyber investigation are vital tools in modern justice. While criminals may think they're in control, technology has become a silent witness that remembers everything, even the things they try hardest to forget. 4. Society needs stronger systems to protect women. Giulia's murder sparked nationwide outrage in Italy, igniting protests and calls for systemic change. It wasn't just her death, it was what her death represented. Women across the country saw themselves in Giulia, trusting a partner, being emotionally manipulated, and ultimately paying the price for a broken justice system that failed to intervene early. Her case wasn't an isolated tragedy. It reflected a much larger issue: the growing number of femicides and domestic violence cases that go ignored or unpunished until it's too late. The protests following Giulia's murder were not just about grief, they were a demand for action. Stricter penalties, better protective measures, and education on recognizing abuse are essential to prevent future tragedies. The justice system must take emotional abuse and controlling behavior seriously. Too often, victims are told there's not enough evidence to act. Giulia's family and the public cried out for accountability, not just for her, but for countless women whose cries were silenced before real help arrived. This story is a wake-up call. We must do more to protect vulnerable individuals. Laws, communities, and institutions must evolve to spot red flags sooner and act with urgency before a manipulator like Alejandro becomes a murderer. 5. One person's courage can lead to justice, even amid guilt. Though Alejandro tried to hide his crime, one critical witness helped prosecutors piece the truth together: Algra, the woman he was cheating with. After finding incriminating messages and learning about the fake DNA test, she chose to testify even though she had unknowingly been part of his deception. Her testimony became a turning point in the trial, shedding light on Alejandro's manipulation and double life. Algra could have disappeared. She could have refused to speak, overwhelmed by guilt or fear. Instead, she chose to come forward, risking public judgment and emotional pain. Through her words, Giulia's story was fully revealed and justice was secured. Her bravery shows that even when we're caught in someone else's web of lies, we still have the power to make a difference. Her courage also reminds us that silence protects perpetrators. Speaking up, even when it's hard, can stop a monster from hurting others. She felt guilt for her part, but her honesty honored Giulia's memory. This teaches us that our actions matter even after tragedy. The truth may come too late to save one life, but it can save others. Courage, even in the darkest moments, can break the silence and lead the way to justice.